The grand chamber of the Galactic Concord hung suspended in the sky of Virelis, a world built not of stone or steel, but of shimmering crystal that sang softly in the solar winds. Inside, the air hummed with tension thicker than the gravity fields holding the delegates in their seats. Over 200 species filled the amphitheater, some with wings folded tight, others with limbs coiled in restraint, a few floating in nutrient-filled bubbles. All were silent. For 10 long cycles, the Cathari hegemony had pushed deeper into neutral space, swallowing star systems one by one, and the Concord had done nothing but talk. Their words had grown hollow, their threats empty, their unity fraying like old rope. At the center of it all sat Ethan Cole, Earth's newest diplomat. He was young for such a role, barely 30, and dressed plainly in a dark blue suit. No medals, no glowing insignia, no ceremonial robes like the others. His hands rested calmly on his lap, but his eyes moved slowly across the chamber, taking in the avian Zenthar with their sharp beaks and feathered cloaks, the gelatinous Mirvok whose forms rippled with unreadable emotion, the armored Krell whose mandibles clicked in quiet frustration. No one paid him much attention. Humans were still seen as newcomers, loud, emotional, and dangerously unpredictable. They had only joined the Concord 50 years ago, after barely surviving their own planet's near destruction. Most thought Earth was lucky to be here at all. The High Arbiter, a tall, silver-skinned being from the ancient Orlan race, rose from the central dais. Her voice, amplified by the chamber's acoustics, echoed like wind through glass. The floor is open for final statements before the recess. Let reason guide your words, for silence has served us too long. One by one, delegates stood and spoke, each repeating the same tired lines. We must seek dialogue. Military action risks total collapse. The hegemony may yet be reasoned with. Their voices were careful, measured, afraid. Even Lyra Voss of the Nalthari, whose people had lost 3 colonies to Cathari raids, only asked for further observation. Then, without fanfare, Ethan Cole stood. A ripple of surprise passed through the chamber. Humans rarely spoke unless spoken to. Many delegates shifted in their seats, expecting an apology for some minor protocol breach or a plea for more aid. But Ethan didn't bow. He didn't fumble with notes. He simply stepped forward to the speaking ring, where the floor glowed faintly beneath his shoes, and faced the entire assembly. I've listened, he began, his voice quiet but clear, carrying without effort. I've listened to calls for patience while the Cathari burn schools and enslave entire populations. I've heard pleas for diplomacy while their warships orbit defenseless worlds like vultures. I've watched this council weigh the cost of action against the cost of doing nothing, and somehow you keep choosing nothing. A low murmur rose. The Zenthar delegate hissed. The Mirvok pulsed a deep violet. Disapproval. Ethan didn't flinch. My people know what silence costs. Before we joined the stars, Earth nearly destroyed itself. Not in one great war, but in 1,000 small failures to act. We waited too long to stop our own wars, our own pollution, our own greed. We learned the hard way that evil doesn't need your permission to grow. It only needs your inaction. He paused, letting the words settle. Then, with a calm that seemed almost unnatural in that charged room, he said, So I'm done asking. I'm done waiting. It's time for war. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ever-present hum of the crystal spire seemed to stop. Delegates froze mid-gesture. The High Arbiter's silver eyes widened slightly, the closest she ever came to showing shock. A Krell general slowly lowered his armored claws, which had been rising in protest. Somewhere in the back, a human aide dropped a data pad, the clatter echoing like a gunshot. No one shouted. No one moved. For a full minute, the chamber held its breath. Then the Zenthar ambassador rose, feathers bristling. You dare speak of war in this hall of peace? Humans, you barely understand the word diplomacy. Ethan turned to him. And you barely understand what happens when peace becomes surrender. Before the Zenthar could retort, the Mirvok delegate rippled forward, their voice a wet, bubbling tone translated by the chamber's systems. War brings chaos. Billions will die. Is that your solution, little mammal? My solution, Ethan said evenly, is to stop pretending that billions aren't already dying. The Cathari don't want peace. They want obedience. And if we give it to them, we become complicit in every life they crush. He looked around, meeting the eyes of species who had ignored humanity for decades. You think we're reckless? Maybe we are. But we're also the only ones willing to say the truth out loud. If no one else will stand, then Earth will stand alone. That last phrase hung in the air like smoke. Alone. The word carried weight. Humanity had no great fleet, no ancient alliances, no hidden weapons. Just stubbornness and scars. And yet in that moment something shifted. Elder Mazan of the Lumari, a species that hadn't fired a weapon in 10,000 years, tilted their translucent head slightly, as if seeing Ethan and humanity for the first time. The High Arbiter finally spoke, her voice softer now. Diplomat Cole, your words are noted. The Concord will recess to consider this. Declaration. As Ethan walked back to his seat, the silence returned, but it was different now. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of reckoning. Whispers began to spread, some angry, some fearful, but a few curious. A young Nalthari aide caught Ethan's eye and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Outside the chamber, alarms blared softly, security protocols activating. Unknown signals had been detected near the diplomatic quarter. Cathari operatives, perhaps, or spies from within the Concord itself. Ethan didn't look toward the exits. He sat down, smoothed his simple suit, and waited. He knew what he'd done. He'd thrown a stone into still water, and now the ripples would either drown them all or wash away the rot. There was no going back, and for the first time in years he felt calm. Because sometimes the bravest thing a person, or a species, can do is stop whispering and finally speak the truth, even if it shakes the stars. The days after Ethan Cole's declaration passed in a blur of tension and secrecy. The Galactic Concord did not meet again in full session. Instead, the corridors of the Virelli Spire filled with hushed conversations, coded messages, and wary glances. Security doubled around the human delegation suite. Ethan moved carefully, always flanked by two quiet Earth security officers, both women with sharp eyes and no-nonsense expressions. He knew the Cathari would not let his words go unanswered. They never did. That night, alone in his quarters, Ethan watched old footage on a small screen. Grainy images of Chicago after the Scorch Wars. Buildings like broken teeth, streets cracked and empty, smoke curling into a blood-red sky. His parents had been engineers working to rebuild water lines under constant threat of raiders. They didn't die in battle. They died waiting for help that never came because no one wanted to escalate. He remembered his mother's last message. Voice weak but steady, sometimes, son. Doing nothing is the same as choosing the wrong side. He turned off the screen. The past was not just memory, it was warning. The next morning, a request came through official channels. Lyra Voss, ambassador of the Nalthari, wished to speak with him privately. They met in a sunlit garden on the spire's outer rim, where floating lilies glowed faintly and the air smelled of salt and ozone. Lyra stood waist-deep in a shallow pool, her blue skin shimmering, gills fluttering gently as she breathed. She did not offer greetings. You shocked them, she said, her voice low and liquid. But shock fades. What comes after? Ethan sat on a smooth stone bench. Action. She turned, her dark eyes unreadable. You speak of war as if it's simple. My people lost 3 colonies, thousands of children taken, mines wiped clean, turned into labor drones. I want vengeance more than most. But if we strike and fail, the Cathari will burn every world that dared oppose them. I know, Ethan said. That's why we don't strike blindly. He handed her a data chip. She took it slowly, her webbed fingers careful. What is this? Proof. And a plan. Later that day, he met with General Torin of the Krell Dominion in a sound-dampened chamber deep in the spire's lower levels. Torin stood nearly 8 feet tall, his chitinous armor clicking with every step. His species valued strength above all, and he had little patience for humans. But he listened as Ethan played intercepted Cathari comms, orders to dismantle planetary defense grids, lists of re-education camps, schematics of new warships being built in the Karen Rift. This is old data, Torin rumbled. The hegemony changes plans weekly. Not this, Ethan replied. This came from a defector, a former Cathari logistics officer who saw what they did to his homeworld. He gave us everything before they found him. Torin's antennae twitched. And you trust him? I trust what he died for. The general was silent for a long moment. Then he leaned forward. If you move, the Krell will watch. But we will not join a suicide mission. Fair enough, Ethan said. Just don't stop us. His final meeting was the hardest. Elder Majan of the Lumari rarely left their meditation spire, and never for matters of war. Yet they agreed to see him. The Lumari were beings of light and thought, their bodies woven from energy and memory. They communicated through gentle pulses of color and soft harmonic tones. In their chamber, time seemed to slow. Ethan spoke plainly. I don't expect you to fight, but your cloaking fields could save thousands of lives. Just let us borrow your silence for a few hours. Majan shimmered, shifting from pale gold to deep indigo. Their voice came not as sound, but as a feeling in Ethan's mind. Why should we break 10,000 years of peace for your war? Because it's not just ours, Ethan answered. The Cathari won't stop at human or Nalthari worlds. They'll come for you too. Not with bombs, but with silence of their own. Erasing your history, your songs, your light. Peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of protection. Majan pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. Then a single beam of silver light touched Ethan's forehead. It carried no words, only understanding. When it faded, the elder gave a slight bow. No promise was spoken, but Ethan knew. He had been heard. Back in his room, Ethan reviewed the intelligence one last time. The Cathari shipyard in the Karen Rift was their heart. Destroy it and their advance would stall for years. Earth's fleet was small, only 12 capital ships compared to the hundreds the older species commanded, but they had something the others lacked: desperation and new tech. Gravitic disruptors that could bend space around enemy shields, AI-driven decoys that mimicked real ships down to the heat signature, and pilots who had grown up in ruins who knew how to fight dirty and win. But there was a problem. The Conquered would never approve a direct strike. Too risky, too human. So Ethan made a choice. Earth would act alone. No flags, no formal declaration, just a clean, fast strike. If they succeeded, maybe others would follow. If they failed, the blame would fall on humanity alone, and the rest of the galaxy could keep pretending. That night, as he prepared his final orders, a soft chime sounded at his door. It was Lena Ruiz, captain of the UNS Resolute and his oldest friend from the Luna Academy. She stepped inside without waiting for an invite, her uniform crisp, her dark hair pulled back tight. "You're really doing this," she said, not a question. "Yes." She crossed her arms. "They'll call us warmongers, traitors, fools." "Let them," Ethan said. "History doesn't remember the names of those who talked. It remembers those who acted." Lena nodded slowly. "The fleet's ready. All ships report green. Crews know the risks. Good." She hesitated, then looked him in the eye. "If we don't come back, tell Earth we didn't run." "We won't have to," Ethan said, "because we're coming back." Just then a sharp pain shot through his side. He gasped, doubling over. Lena caught him as his legs gave out. His vision blurred. On the floor, a tiny puncture mark glowed faintly on his neck, almost invisible. A microdart. Cathari neurotoxin? Slow-acting, designed to mimic a heart attack. They hadn't tried to kill him outright. They wanted him discredited, dying alone in his room, his words forgotten. Lena activated her comm. "Medical emergency. Cole's been poisoned." As darkness crept in, Ethan clung to one thought. They were afraid. That meant he was getting close. He woke hours later in a med bay, tubes in his arms, monitors beeping softly. The toxin had been neutralized, but his body was weak. A Nalthari medic stood by his side, her expression grim. "You were lucky. Another hour and your neural pathways would have collapsed." Ethan tried to speak, but his throat was dry. She gave him water. Outside the window, stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the Cathari waited. Somewhere closer, allies watched and wondered. And on Earth, billions lived unaware that their fate now rested on a poisoned diplomat and a handful of ships sailing into the dark. But even as his body trembled, Ethan's mind was clear. Let them doubt. Let them fear. Humanity had been counted out before, and every time they rose, not with shouts, but with silent steel and stubborn hope. The war hadn't started yet, but it would, and when it did, the galaxy would learn that humans didn't just survive, they protected. Ethan Cole stood before the emergency council not as a diplomat, but as a man with nothing left to lose. His body still ached from the Cathari poison. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice did not. The chamber was smaller this time. Only a dozen key delegates, all species that held real power in the Conquered. They watched him with guarded eyes, some with pity, others with suspicion. He knew what they expected. A retraction, an apology, a quiet retreat into silence. Instead, he placed a single data slate on the table. "This is Operation Dawnbreaker," he said. The slate lit up, showing star maps, ship schematics, and timelines. At its center glowed the Karen Rift, a swirling storm of gas and radiation where the Cathari had built their largest shipyard, hidden behind layers of sensor-scrambling debris. No Concord fleet had dared approach it. Now Ethan proposed sending Earth's entire active fleet, 12 ships, barely a whisper against the hegemony's might, on a one-way strike mission. General Torin of the Krell leaned forward, his armored plates clicking. "You expect us to believe your tiny fleet can destroy that fortress?" "No," Ethan said. "I expect us to cripple it long enough for others to act." Lyra Voss of the Nalthari studied the plan. "You're asking for no troops. No political cover. Just supplies and silence." "Exactly," Ethan replied. "If we fail, the blame is ours alone. If we succeed, maybe you'll finally see that waiting is the real danger." Elder Mazan of the Lumari pulsed softly, their light shifting from blue to amber. Through the translator, their thought came clear. Why risk everything for a chance? "Because the chance is all we have," Ethan answered. "And because if we don't, who will?" The room fell quiet. Then slowly, Lyra Voss spoke. "The Nalthari will provide fuel cells and medical drones. Not as allies. As witnesses," Torin grunted. "The Krell will monitor your comms. If you break formation or target civilians, we will destroy you ourselves." Ethan nodded. "Fair." Majan shimmered again, and this time a small device floated from their robes, a cloaking resonator, no bigger than a human hand. "For the Resolute," the Elder sent. "May your light not be seen until it is too late." It wasn't full support. It wasn't even trust. But it was enough. Back in the human wing, Ethan met with Captain Lena Ruiz and the fleet commanders. They gathered in a dim briefing room, walls lined with star charts and old Earth flags. "No fanfare, no speeches. Just facts. We go in 3 cycles," Lena said. "Gravitic disruptors are loaded. AI decoys are synced. All crews have volunteered. No orders, just choice." Ethan looked at their faces. Young men and women, most born after Earth's recovery, raised on stories of loss and resilience. They weren't soldiers by birth. They were engineers, pilots, medics who had chosen to fight so others wouldn't have to. "Remember," Ethan said, "this isn't about glory. It's about giving the galaxy a reason to stand up. If we make the Cathari bleed even a little, others will see they can be hurt." He handed Lena a sealed message chip. "If I don't make it back, send this to Earth. Let them know why we did it." She took it without a word, tucking it into her uniform. That night, Ethan recorded his final message. He sat alone in his room, the city of Virellis glittering below like scattered diamonds. He spoke slowly, simply, as if talking to a friend. "If you're hearing this, we've already launched. Don't mourn us. Don't call us heroes. We're just people who refuse to look away. Tell the kids in Chicago and Nairobi and Jakarta they're safe because someone chose to act. And if the Concord finally moves, if peace comes, remember it wasn't given, it was taken back." He stopped the recording. Outside, a transport ship hummed to life, carrying the last supplies to the waiting fleet docked in orbit. The next morning, Ethan walked through the spire one last time. Delegates avoided his gaze. Some whispered as he passed. He didn't care. At the main gate, he paused. A young Nalthari aide, barely more than a child, stood waiting. She held out a small carved shell glowing faintly. "For courage," she said in broken standard. Ethan took it, touched. "Thank you." He didn't know her name. She didn't know his. But in that moment, they understood each other. A shuttle lifted him to orbit. Below, Virellis shrank into a speck of light. Above, the UNS Resolute waited, sleek and dark against the stars. Lena stood at the airlock, arms crossed. "You look like hell," she said. "Feel like it too," Ethan replied, climbing aboard. Inside, the ship was quiet. No music, no chatter, just the low thrum of engines and the soft beeps of systems coming online. Crew members moved with calm purpose. They knew what lay ahead. None showed fear. As the Resolute broke orbit, Ethan stood on the command deck watching Earth's blue dot fade into the black. He thought of his parents, of ruined streets and silent nights. He thought of the Concord's endless talks, of children in Cathari camps, of galaxies too afraid to protect themselves. Then he turned to Lena. "Set course for the Karen Rift." "Aye." "Sir," she said. The fleet formed up. 12 ships, small against the void. No banners, no fanfare. Just humans sailing into the storm not because they loved war, but because they loved peace enough to fight for it. In the conquered chamber far below, the delegates waited. Some hoped for failure. Others prayed for success. None truly believed 12 human ships could change anything. But out in the dark, where courage mattered more than numbers, the first move had already been made. And sometimes all it takes is one spark to light the fire that saves a galaxy. The Charon Rift boiled with crimson gas and jagged asteroids, a storm of dust and radiation that swallowed sensors whole. Inside it, hidden like a predator in tall grass, sat the Cathari primary shipyard, a monstrous ring of black alloy studded with weapon turrets, docking arms, and half-built warships. No fleet had entered this place in 50 cycles. Today, 12 human ships slipped through the chaos like ghosts. Captain Lena Ruiz stood on the bridge of the UNS Resolute, her eyes locked on the main display. Around her, the crew moved in silence, hands steady on controls, voices low and calm. The Lumari cloaking resonator hummed softly in the core, bending light and sensor waves around them. For now, they were invisible. "Decoys ready," said a young officer named Kyle. "Launch them," Lena ordered. From the Resolute's bay, 6 AI-driven drones shot forward, mimicking the heat, mass, and signal of real warships. They split into formation, drawing toward the shipyard's outer defenses. Almost instantly, Cathari turrets swiveled, energy beams lancing out. 2 decoys vanished in silent flashes. The others danced through the fire, buying time. "Gravitic disruptors charging," another voice reported. "Hold until we're past the inner ring," Lena said. Ethan Cole watched from the observation deck, his body still weak but his mind sharp. He saw the Cathari response, fast, brutal, predictable. They expected a large fleet. They didn't expect trickery. They didn't expect humans. On the bridge, alarms began to blare. "They've spotted us," Kyle said. "Cloak's failing, radiation's too strong." "Then we go loud," Lena said. "All ships break formation. Hit hard, hit fast." The Resolute dropped its cloak. Around it, the other human vessels emerged from the storm like wolves from smoke. Engines roared as they surged forward, weaving through asteroid fields, dodging fire with movements too sharp for standard AI. These pilots had trained in Earth's ruined skies where every turn meant life or death. They didn't fly like soldiers. They flew like survivors. The first human frigate, the Dawn Chaser, fired its gravitic disruptor. A pulse of warped space shot forward, not as a beam but as a ripple. It struck a Cathari shield generator. The shield didn't explode, it collapsed inward, folding on itself like paper in a fist. The turret behind it crumpled silently. "Direct hit," someone whispered. "Keep pushing," Lena said. But the Cathari were not idle. Reinforcements poured from the shipyard. Fighters, gunships, even half-finished cruisers thrown into battle. The human fleet was outnumbered 10-1. On the Resolute's screen, 2 red dots vanished. The Horizon Light and the Iron Sparrow, gone with all hands. Ethan closed his eyes for a second. He knew those names. He'd shaken those hands. Now they were just static on a comms channel. Back on Varelli's, the Galactic Concord watched in real time. The emergency chamber was packed. Delegates stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes fixed on the massive display showing the battle. No one spoke. No one moved. They saw the tiny human ships darting through fire, striking with precision, losing comrades without slowing down. The Zenthar ambassador, who had mocked Ethan days before, now gripped the edge of his seat, feathers stiff with tension. The Miravok pulsed a deep, anxious red. Even General Torin leaned forward, mandibles still. Then came the turning point. Lena Ruiz guided the Resolute straight toward the shipyard's central core, the antimatter forge where fuel for Cathari engines was made. It was the most protected spot, ringed by point defense cannons and shielded by 3 overlapping energy fields. "We won't make it," Kyle said, voice tight. "We don't have to," Lena replied. "Just get close enough." She activated the last decoy, a full-scale illusion of the Resolute, complete with fake engine trails and false comms chatter. The Cathari took the bait. Their guns turned toward the fake. In that split second, the real Resolute dove beneath the shield gap, engine screaming. "Disruptor at full," Lena ordered. The shot fired, not at the forge itself, but at the gravity stabilizers holding the antimatter in place. The pulse hit. The stabilizers failed. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the forge tore itself apart. A chain reaction began. One tank exploded, then another, then the core. The shipyard didn't just burn, it unraveled. Metal twisted like rope, fire bloomed in slow motion, and the shockwave rolled outward, swallowing fighters, asteroids, even the decoys. On the bridge, alarms blared. "Brace for impact," Lena shouted. The Resolute shook violently as the wave hit, but the hull held. Around them, the remaining human ships, only 7 now, regrouped, battered but alive. In the conquered chamber, a cheer erupted. Not loud, not wild, but real. Lyra Voss let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Elder Mazan glowed bright gold. General Torrin slammed a claw on the table and roared, "The Krell stand with Earth, we march at dawn." But the victory had a cost. As the Resolute turned for home, medics rushed to the observation deck. Ethan Cole had collapsed. The Cathari toxin, though neutralized, had left his heart weak. The stress of battle, the grief, the strain, it was too much. He lay pale on the floor, breathing shallowly. Lena knelt beside him. "Stay with us, Ethan." He opened his eyes, just a slit. "Did we do it?" "We did," she said. He smiled faintly. "Good." Then his eyes closed. Not in death, but in exhaustion. The medics carried him away as the ship jumped to warp, leaving the burning ruins of the Karen Rift behind. Back on Varelli's, the mood had changed. Delegates who once whispered about human recklessness now spoke of courage. Species that had hidden behind neutrality began offering ships, supplies, intelligence. The war had not ended, but it had shifted. The Cathari were no longer untouchable, and humanity, small and scarred, had shown the galaxy how to strike back. In orbit, the surviving human ships limped home, their hulls scorched, their crews silent. They had lost friends. They had faced death. But they had also proven something, that peace is not kept by waiting, but by daring to act when others won't. And as the stars rolled past the Resolute's windows, the galaxy held its breath, not in fear but in hope. Because for the first time in decades, someone had lit a fire in the dark, and fires once started are hard to put out. Ethan Cole woke to the soft hum of a medical frigate's life support and the scent of antiseptic. Sunlight, real sunlight, filtered through the ship's viewports, fell across his blanket. He blinked, disoriented. His chest ached, but the crushing weight of poison was gone. A Nalthari medic stood nearby, her gills fluttering in a slow rhythm of relief. "You've been asleep for 12 days, she said gently. "The war has begun." He tried to sit up. She helped him. On the screen across the room, silent footage played. Krell warships breaking orbit, Nalthari carriers launching fighters, even Lumari light craft weaving through battle lines, cloaking entire squadrons. The Cathari hegemony, once unchallenged, was now on the defensive. Revolts had broken out in a dozen occupied systems. Subject species inspired by the human strike were rising up. Ethan swallowed. "Did we win?" "No," the medic said. "But you gave us a chance to fight back." Later that day, he was moved to a recovery bay aboard the newly formed Orion Alliance flagship, a vessel built from old conquered parts and human engineering. The corridors buzzed with activity. Humans walked side by side with Zenthar, Krell, and Mirvok, not as outsiders, but as partners. No one bowed to him, but many nodded as he passed. Respect, not worship. That was enough. The High Arbiter herself came to see him. Her silver skin gleamed under the ship's lights. "The conquered is no more," she said. "In its place stands the Orion Alliance. And you, Ethan Cole, are invited to speak at its founding assembly." He shook his head. "I'm not a leader. I'm just a man who said what needed saying." "Sometimes," she replied, "that is the rarest kind of leader." When the day came, he stood once more in a great chamber. But this one was different. No cold crystal, no distant seats. This hall was built for unity, with open circles and shared light. Delegates from over 300 species filled the space, including many who had once called humanity reckless. Now they listened. Ethan wore the same simple blue suit, slightly worn. He did not raise his voice. He did not ask for honors. "We didn't do this for glory," he began. "We didn't strike the Karen Rift because we loved war. We did it because we loved peace enough to protect it. For too long, this galaxy waited for someone else to act. We waited while worlds burned, while children vanished, while fear dressed itself as wisdom. No more." He looked at Lyra Voss, who gave a small nod, at General Torrin, whose armored chest rose with pride, at Elder Majan, glowing softly in the front row. "The Cathari taught us a hard truth: evil doesn't negotiate. It only respects strength. But strength isn't just weapons. It's courage. It's choosing to stand when it's easier to sit. It's protecting those who can't protect themselves. He paused, then added, "So I ask you not to thank us. I ask you to join us, not in war for its own sake, but in defense of every world that believes in tomorrow." When he stepped down, there was no applause. Just silence, deep and full. Then one by one species rose, not to cheer but to pledge. The Zenthar offered their sky fleets. The Mirvok shared their deep space sensors. Even the pacifist Lumari vowed to shield refugee convoys. The alliance was no longer a name. It was a promise. After the assembly, Ethan walked alone to the observation deck. Below, Earth hung in the black, a blue marble wrapped in clouds, whole and healing. Cities glowed at night. Children played in parks rebuilt over old ruins. They didn't know about the Karen Rift. They didn't need to. That was the point. A voice came from behind him. "You turned the tide," Lena Ruiz said, joining him at the rail. "No," he said. "We just reminded them they had oars," she smiled. "What now?" "Now we rebuild. Not just ships, but trust. Not just peace, but justice." Back on Earth, in a quiet neighborhood outside Denver, a little girl named Mara ran through her backyard, chasing fireflies. Her mother watched from the porch, sipping tea. Above them, the stars shone steady and calm. No alarms, no sirens. Just night and safety and time. Mara didn't know about Ethan Cole. She didn't know about gravitic disruptors or poisoned diplomats or burning shipyards. But she would grow up in a galaxy that remembered what humans did when silence became complicity. She would learn that peace is not given, it is guarded. And sometimes, it is won by the quiet ones who dare to speak first. On the bridge of the Resolute, now refitted as a peacekeeping vessel, Kyle, the young officer who had launched the decoys, trained new pilots. He taught them not just how to fly, but why they flew. "We don't fight to destroy," he told them. "We fight so others don't have to." Far out in the Orion Arm, Alliance fleets patrolled the borders, not as conquerors, but as shields. The Cathari hegemony still existed, but it was fractured, its grip broken. Former slaves walked free. Burned cities lit their lights again, and in the heart of it all, humanity sailed. Not at the front, not at the back, but beside their allies, equal and unafraid. They had not sought power. They had offered courage. And in doing so, they had changed everything. Ethan never took a title. He never wore medals. He returned to Earth months later, walking the streets of Chicago not as a hero, but as a man home from work. He visited his parents' memorial, placed a stone on the plaque, and whispered, "We stood." That night he sat on a rooftop looking up at the stars. The same stars that had once seemed so cold, so distant, now felt like neighbors. The galaxy was still vast, still dangerous, but it was no longer alone, because somewhere in the quiet between the stars a lesson had been learned, that the smallest voice, speaking truth at the right moment, can echo across 1,000 worlds. And that sometimes all it takes to save peace is one person willing to say, "It's time for war."